Please note that this podcast does reference information about depression, anxiety, and suicide ideation. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical advice. If needing extra support, please reference the support resources at the end of the podcast and/or in the comment section below.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mindful Moments with NAMI Next Gen Council. So you might be wondering, what is NAMI Next Gen? We are a young adult advisory council representing the voices of youth and young adults across the country in an effort to spread awareness and information about mental health issues. NAMI Next Gen started at the national level, and Oklahoma received a grant, so here we are. There aren't a lot of councils at the state or affiliate level. This is still new, and we're one of the first to bring it to our community. Our hope is to end the stigma of speaking about mental health while also having younger voices at the table. Remember, nothing about us without us.
There are 9 members of NAMI Next Gen, including myself. My name is Anna, and this is Maya. We also have Haley Harder, Callan Delaney, Emma Valgora, Leigh Johnson, Madison Waller, and Ava Leidner. We have our community mentor, Ashley Earhart, and 3 staff mentors, Jason Musgrove, Felicia Stroud, and Lorna Palmer.
Today we have Callan Delaney producing this episode, and as previously stated, my name is Maya Williams-Faraha.
My name is Anna Bennett.
And today we're going to be talking about anxiety and depression. So before we get too deep into this topic, we love to put a trigger warning here, understanding that anxiety and depression are pretty heavy topics. So if at any point you're feeling down, just take a step away, go get a nice warm drink, and come back to us.
Is anxiety something you typically discuss with friends?
So for me, I feel like anxiety is something that's easily talked about among my friends. It wasn't for a long time. I think maybe as I came into adulthood and didn't feel any shame or guilt about the way that I felt, that I was able to vocalize like, hey guys, I'm not feeling well about this situation, or, oh, y'all want to go to this party or this location. And I'm like, oh, that makes me feel anxious. And now it's so much easier for me to have these conversations with my friends. I think they're all very open and accepting. But I'm open to it, and I'm open to hearing my friends talk about anxiety. Because what are you going through? I care about you. You care about me. And I just want to make sure that we're all comfortable in the situations that we're putting ourselves in. Even if I'm not there, tell me what's going on with you. Are you feeling anxious at that party? I'll come get you. Like, what do we need to do to get you to feel all right? So, mental health is something I'm big on talking about, and anxiety being one of the most common mental illnesses, is one that I find myself talking about a lot with friends.
Definitely. Yeah. I think at least in my experience, and it sounds like in your experience too, as I've gotten older and as I've kind of come into my own journey with my anxiety, I tend to draw towards friends that are not necessarily also suffer from it. Some do, some don't, but are at least supportive of the fact that this is a real thing. This is, something that has a big handle on your life, and maybe more at certain times than others, but just being surrounded by people that are supportive of that and that are supportive of, what you need when, and knowing when this is too much or that's too little and whatnot.
I like that you talked about not all of your friends suffer with anxiety, and like still surrounding yourself with the people who are going to be supportive and accepting of that.
Because your real friends should be wanting to learn about the things that you struggle with and the things that you go through and that are important into your life and your journey and story and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
Can symptoms of anxiety be seen as, quote, normal for many people in the working class or in school?
Yes, I do think poor people are supposed to, or lower class people are supposed to be stressed because you're not where you're supposed to be in life yet. You're a student. You're supposed to be stressed because you haven't graduated yet. But like, that's not normal. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not normal. But our culture tells us like, you just need to work harder, and working harder can lead to that anxiety. So I definitely think it's normalized.
Definitely. Yeah. I drink 2 Alanis a day, so I can't really say much on the caffeine front because that would be hypocritical. But I do think that, not even necessarily if you're in the workforce yet, like I'm in college and you're still in college.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even then we live in a society where we work to live we live to work, not work to live, which is how it should be.
Right.
And, so all of those things combined with just the prevalence of anxiety in our society in general, I think that there's a huge crossover between the two where the lines get blurred and it's hard to tell the difference between that and what is normal, healthy anxiety, because, our bodies produce anxiety naturally, but we've kind of crossed over that line of healthy and unhealthy. And especially as an American society, we are pushing those borders continuously where we don't know where to stop and start.
Right.
When it comes to that. Definitely for me too, in school. Ooh, did I turn this off? Never mind. I think that it starts in such an early age too. Like, I went to a high school that was very academically challenging, and not in a sense of like it being a good thing. It was pushing too much too far so early, and I think that a lot of young people have that similar experience. And so we get ourselves into an anxious state and a constant state of anxious living at such a young age that becomes our normal. So we don't know when to stop and pause and say, okay, why am I feeling like this? Because we've been feeling like this since we were 15 years old.
Definitely. I remember I took a AP US history course or world history. I can't remember, but the class was so easy to me. And I remember I would never turn in my notes and I would ace all of the tests. And my teacher, he was like, aren't you like stressed out that you're not doing the notes? Aren't you stressed out? And I'm like, no, I read the book. Like, I know what needs to be done. There's no reason for me to be stressed. But like you said, they can push it on you in school of like, and academics did and still do mean a lot to me, but I don't feel the need to like stress myself out if I didn't turn something in. But my teachers were like bearing this weight on me of like, well, you should feel terrible about yourself because you didn't turn in the notes and now you're going to take this test and somehow you're magically going to pass.
No, people are oblivious to the fact that everyone has different learning styles in the same way that we process our emotions differently and how we deal with all the different regular challenges of life. We learn differently, whether it's in an academic sense or learning about ourselves. And I think that people fail to recognize that you got to let people take a second and figure out what their learning style is going to be and what works for them.
Yeah.
Maya, how has genetics played a part in your story with anxiety?
Yes. Basically, my entire family is anxious. And I say this as a person, obviously I am an African-American woman, but not only am I an African-American woman, I'm a foundational Black American, meaning that you can trace my ancestry back to slavery on both sides of my family. And one of the things that comes with that is post-traumatic slave disorder, which is a real thing. Look it up. But this stress that has been passed down from generations in my family, this drive to be perfect that has been passed down in my family. I know that my mother suffers with anxiety. Just having talked to my grandmother also suffers from anxiety. And I also knew my great grandmother growing up. She also suffered with anxiety. Then I have sisters. It's something that has been passed down through generations, and living in a society such as America, where we are constantly anxious.
Okay, I want to pause for a second, and before I speak anymore after what Maya just said, recognize my privilege as a white person, as you should too. Because I grew up in a great environment and am not necessarily a person that you would think would be subjected to anxiety. My mom definitely has it, I think, but wasn't necessarily diagnosed and it wasn't talked about. It wasn't a thing that I knew was in my family growing up. So from the looks of things, I was pretty safe.
Anna, how has your environment affected your anxiety struggles?
I think your environment has a huge part to deal with your mental wellness in general. I am in an environment now and in a place now that is very conducive to mental wellness, but I've been in environments that are not conducive to mental wellness. And I think a huge part of that is the people that you're around too. I know we probably all hear this from our parents and, older people or just mentors in your life in general, but I really do think it rings true that the people who you are around are who you are and really do have such a large effect on your day-to-day mood and your mental health in general. Right. And I think for me, the bottom and the rut of my mental health struggles were in high school, where I was consistently choosing people that were controlling and that didn't necessarily have my best interests in mind, because when you're in a vulnerable state, I think you tend to seek out environments and people that are controlling, because that way you don't have to make the decisions, because a lot of the time you don't have the energy to make those decisions. So whether it be subconscious or conscious, you choose, at least for me, and obviously it may be different for other people, but you choose places and people where you're not given that extra decision when you already have so many other decisions and things to think about.
Have you both found that anxiety seeps into more than just one aspect of your life?
Most definitely. Yes. Immediately, the answer is yes. If I am anxious about, I can be anxious about paying rent, so now I'm anxious about work. So now I'm anxious about the time that I'm spending with my friends. And now I'm anxious about the lack of time that I'm spending with my family. So I think it definitely starts to roll into one situation. It can start at the top and then it lends itself to other issues that you're having in your life to cause you anxiety. I know school for me is always I'm so happy it's summer. Oh, I hate to say it. I am an academic, but I'm so happy it's summer, because school can cause so much anxiety that just seeps into the rest of my life and affects the environments around me to where I can't be okay because I'm anxious about this test I have tomorrow. So everything else is, I'm on the ball of anxiety.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I am in nursing school and have so much on my plate, so I'm loving the summer life. But at least for me, I feel like sleep is such a big thing that's affected by anxiety and depression. But at least for me, mainly my anxiety, if I don't get enough sleep, I start getting anxious about not getting enough sleep. And I know many people with anxiety, and I didn't realize that this was a trait of anxiety, is counting the amount of hours that you're going to get whenever you're in your bed waiting. I didn't realize that was not normal until I was told that is not normal. But beyond that, and then whenever you're running off low sleep, you start to catastrophize every other thing in your life. If you don't get enough sleep, it's really hard to regulate your emotions. So if one little thing upsets you, I will catastrophize every other situation in the rest of my life, in the sense that, like, if I'm worried about this one test, I'm not going to get my degree, and then I'm not going to be able to pay my rent, and then I'm going to end up homeless. And it jumps so quickly. It's not realistic, but the feelings are real and the feelings are valid, but they're not normal.
But they're not normal. Yeah, I fully agree with that.
How often have you two heard from a friend that they struggle with depression or struggle with it yourself? Is it a common topic of discussion in your lives?
That's a big one. I think a lot of the time, and I definitely experienced this too at times in my life where I was depressed, is that you're depressed without even realizing it because it's not talked about enough. So, there's been times where I've noticed in friends that, like, hey, something is not right, or a friend has noticed in me, hey, something is not right. But that's a harder thing to pinpoint within ourselves because, we're at such a low point emotionally that it's hard to even recognize what you might be going through. And I think that plays into where having a support system is so vital, because at a time where maybe you can't recognize what you're going through yourself, if you have a good support system and people that want better things for you and want the best for you, that they may be able to point out, hey, you seem off this week, or something doesn't seem right. And then that may be, a cue to you that, oh, okay, maybe I do need to figure this out, or make that therapy appointment, or, just call a trusted friend or somebody to talk about what you may be going through.
For me, my journey with depression has been long and rough. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder at 14 years old. And to be quite frank, even to this day, while it's easy for me to talk about anxiety, it is very hard for me to talk about my depression. There's still a lot of shame and guilt that I don't really understand mixed up in my depression, just because of the way it comes out for me. I don't really talk about my depression as much as I talk about my anxiety. And And that's something that I still have a hard time talking to my therapist about. Like, it's such a heavy cloud for me, and I'm just such a bright, bubbly person that I don't want to put that on other people. And I know, as we're talking about it right now, obviously I have people who care about me who that's not a bother to them. But I feel a lot of shame and guilt of like, oh my God, like I'm supposed to be the happy person. I need to mask. I need to go back to being happy, Maya. I need to be fun, Maya. Anxiety is like, I wouldn't say it's cool, but people get on the net and they talk about their anxiety. It's normalized. Whereas depression, people are like, oh, you didn't shower for 3 days? No, I didn't because I'm depressed. Like, how do you talk to people about that? And I grew up super affluent and my parents were like, well, there's no reason for you to be sad. You have everything you could want. And so I still feel like I carry that with me now of like, oh, you have everything you could want. Like, how could you be depressed? Mm-hmm. So just like working through that and like what it is I'm internalizing that's stopping me from just admitting I am depressed. Yeah. I am not having a good month. I'm not having a good week. I am depressed. It's something to work through.
Definitely. Yeah. I think going back to what you were saying about your parents, talking about, you have this great life. Why are you depressed? I think a large thing in the older generation is seeing depression and the effects of that as ungrateful rather than a serious issue. Mm-hmm. And my parents were always very supportive of that time in my life. And I was blessed to have parents that were willing to learn and do what they needed to do to help me. But not everyone is as fortunate as I was to have people on your side to support you, especially when it comes to family, because whether we realize it or not, having family that supports you can either really help in your life, or if you don't have that, it can cause some serious trauma and manifest in lots of different ways.
Definitely.
Do you believe that depression is something that can easily happen to a person?
It could be you're an avid runner, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're running one day, you destroy your ankle. You've taken away the one thing that you really enjoy in life. And that could lead you to spiral into a deep depression just because some would say just because you broke your ankle. No, that's huge. That's taking away something that's an integral part of someone's life. So I think depression is easy to come by and hard to get over.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so many things in our lives and that are different for every people on things we feel to give us purpose. And it's so easy to, lose those things in an instant. And in the same way, it's really easy to get into that hole, but it's so much harder to claw your way out because, those things that were such an important part of your life are now gone. And you have that sense of purposelessness, which leads to loneliness, and you feel alone and you feel like nobody understands because, you may not know people that have been in the same situation as you. And it's different for everyone, but I think that there is a common experience among most people.
Do you see depression more often in the medical field than you do in your normal day-to-day life?
The hospital in general can be it's a scary place. And I feel like going through nursing school, I have to remind myself of that every time I walk into the hospital that, this is a normal place for me, but for the patients that I'm taking care of today, this is the worst, possibly one of the worst times of their lives. So just reminding myself of that going in there every day, I think, makes me a more empathetic person and more aware and in tune to the fact of, while people may be going through these, like physical ailments, there are a lot of psychological and mental ailments that come with going through those sorts of struggles as well.
I have a question. You're a nurse.
Not yet.
You're a nurse. Cindy, look, we're manifesting it. We're manifesting it. You got it.
I got hand clicks.
One
more year.
You got it. My best friend is a nurse. She works in the ER. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, we're talking about patients, but like, nurses in general, do you think that working in a field where you're caring for other people who are going through these situations, do you find that affects your anxiety and or depression?
I knew going into nursing school that would be an issue for me because I'm such an emotionally rooted person. I'm a feeler. I'm a big empath. Mm-hmm. So I always knew that it would be hard to separate my work life from my personal life and not take on people's issues because, there are still times where I find myself thinking about a particular patient that really affected me and their story was really sad for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks later. Yeah. So I think there's no way around the fact that it's a hard career, and just the medical field in general, whether it be nurses or RTs or PTs or OTs or doctors. There's a large emotional weight that comes with that. But at the same time, if you deal with it in the correct way, it can make very positive changes to your life as well. Like I've had, experiences with patients that have completely changed my outlook on things. And, there's negatives and positives to it for sure. I am confident that it's the right field for me, but I do have to be aware and consciously making efforts to take care of my mental health and myself first, because if I can't take care of myself, then I can't take care of my patients in the best way and give them the best care that they all deserve.
Do you see a correlation between anxiety and depression?
Yes. I think they go hand in hand with one another. Yeah. And it can be very hard to differentiate anxiety from depression. Mm-hmm. And I think they lend themselves to each other at times.
They thrive off of each other, and they eat off of each other in a way, and feed their what's the word I'm trying to look for? Like, I guess like emotional fuel in a way. Yeah. One fuels the other, and they can exacerbate each other.
Definitely. And so they feel the same at times, and they fuel each other. But the big ones that are, have the difference between anxiety is depression, is the hopelessness, is the suicidal ideation. Those are the ones where I'm like, I can tell if it's anxiety or depression that I'm suffering with right now. But it feels the same. It feels the same sometimes. I'm like, am I anxious or am I depressed? What am I going through? What is this that I'm feeling? They lend to each other for sure.
It's easier for me to get the things done that I need to get done, and not be in that like deep dark hole that depression can put you in. But if you're experiencing both at the same time, then it's hard to differentiate between the two, because you're not at that high functioning place that many people who just experience anxiety are. And like I said, one can exacerbate the other.
I like that you brought up the high functioning, because mine is the exact opposite. Like, I can function I'm not functioning, let's be so for real, but it looks like to the outside world that I'm functioning very well within my depression. Like I show up, I look put together, I laugh, I smile, I joke, and then I go home and all I do is cry and lay in bed. Right. When I'm anxious, it's like, you can see it on me. Like it sits on me. You can tell I rock. I'm like, it looks a little differently for me. And so it's very interesting to hear that you can be high functioning in anxiety, whereas I can be high functioning in depression. So it just really shows that it can look differently on each person of how you carry that weight of anxiety or depression.
Can you elaborate on why stigma affects so many people?
I think that the media, at least when I was growing up, framed mental illness in a way that made people dangerous. So if I were to tell people, which this is true, I'm very open about my mental health now, that I have BPD, people are like, oh, you must be insane. You just snap on people and you're crazy. No, I'm not crazy. But saying this, that's what the media has framed mental illnesses as. That's what, for depression, people see depression, you're supposed to be laid out on the ground somewhere, you can't move. What is that one show, Euphoria, where she lays in bed until her stomach literally hurts because she can't get up because she has depression? And people think that's the only thing that depression looks like. And I think that lends itself to the stigma of if you don't look like you're struggling, then you must not be depressed, because you pay your bills and you go to school, you go to work. So you can't possibly have that, or you can possibly be anxious because I'm here talking to a camera right now. So there's no way I could have anxiety. So I think the way that the media frames mental illness and conditions people to see it can make people feel very shameful when they're not exhibiting mental illness that way. Or like I said, or feeling like they're a dangerous person because they have these mental illnesses. But obviously so many of us struggle with depression and anxiety that there's no reason to feel this way. And it obviously, as we've talked about, looks differently for every single person. But that's not what we're shown.
The worst time of my depression was when I was in high school, and I was a high school cheerleader, and I had friends, and I came from a great family, and I went to private school, and all these things that you would think of, okay, that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing leading up to that would make sense for her to be depressed. But again, you never know what's truly going on in someone's life and what's happening behind the scenes. And, once they get home from school or get home from work that day, you don't know what the rest of their day looks like when they're by themselves, left alone with their own thoughts, or, they go back to a situation that it hurts them seriously, because again, we never know what's going on at home. We never know what's truly going on with people. And a lot of the time, even if it's not necessarily having to do with somebody else, they're in a battle with their own minds.
Why do you think it's so difficult for many people to recognize or talk openly about mental health before it becomes a crisis?
I think older generations take depression and anxiety very personally. And let's say that their young kids or their adult children now come to them and say Mom, Dad, I'm depressed. Well, how dare you be depressed? I gave you everything you ever needed. And it's like, bro, this was never about you. It's not about you. My great grandmother would take it personally if I was sad about something. It's just girl, that kind of has nothing to do with you. I can be sad and still love my family. I can be sad and still be very appreciative of everything that I have. But what I have observed from older generations is that it seems that they feel as though if you have everything that you need, then you can't be sad. You can't feel depressed. You can't be anxious. You can't have mental health issues because, well, you have the basic needs, but we have more needs than food, shelter, water.
Right. Yeah. I think that's where a large piece of the shame part that we were talking about comes in is, okay, my family is making me feel like I have all these things, and obviously I have all these things to be grateful for, then why do I feel this way? And you end up feeling guilty for feeling that way. And luckily for me, my mother is chronically online, so she's with it, and she appreciates the drama and encourages me to talk about what I'm feeling. I remember every day in high school, one of the biggest things that got me through the lowest years of my life was my mom would text me every single day and say, okay, how are we feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? Yeah. And it's just those constant check-ins and, encouraging the people that are close to you to talk about your feelings and talk about what you're going through can make the biggest difference in your life. And I know that it made the biggest difference for me, because whenever I didn't have anybody but my mom, my sister, and my dad, those check-ins and those moments of knowing that somebody cared about me and that I was in an environment where it was okay to talk about what I was going through made a really large difference. And I think that's a lot of the hope that I have with our generation whenever because we're coming to the time where people are starting to have kids, that I think that's going to make the biggest difference. And that scares me. I can't even think about that. I am not
life into the world.
I am not mature enough for that yet. But in general, I have a large hope for our future and for, just, the future of our children, that they're going to grow up in a place where they feel like that their feelings are okay and that emotions are a good thing and not something that, we should not talk about. And especially for men, that it's okay to cry and it's okay to talk about, your struggles, and that you don't have to put up this protector front all the time. I think a lot of people don't care about the issue until it's too late, because a hard issue like mental illness and depression can be seen as a burden. And even though it shouldn't be, it's a hard thing to deal with. And, whenever somebody's in that low of a place, they need a lot of support. And that's not necessarily convenient to everyone's lives at the time. They would rather, okay, I'm not going through this, so I'm just going to pick up and move on with my life. And, they'll get the help they need. It's it's the same thing as the bystander effect, where, somebody else will come along to support them until nobody does, and it's too late.
I know that my family did not engage with my mental illness when I was very clearly showing signs at a young age, until I started engaging in suicidal attempts.
Right.
And it wasn't until that moment where they were like, oh, there's something wrong with her,
Right.
when it was very obvious. But I think that they felt that it was a burden to keep asking me what's wrong. And like, I was a kid. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know how to talk about it. So I think that's also a part of it, like not having the language to describe what's happening to you,
Right.
not really understanding what's happening to you. I remember I was maybe like 12. I didn't know that it was depression, but I remember the day my life became a dark cloud, and that's all it was. But I don't know how to tell my parents, like, I'm depressed. I just wake up every morning and I feel like crap and I don't want to do anything and I cry all the time and I don't want to do anything that I love, but I don't have the language for this.
Right, because most of the time, I think whenever you're going through something like that, you don't even understand it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, is that, you need those important people around you to help you understand that and help you get into contact with the right resources and people that are going to help you be able to put that into words.
Yeah. So when you don't have the language, when you've never seen someone around you be supported in their mental illness, it can be hard to ask for help. It can be hard to even notice that someone else needs help. I think now as an adult, that because depression never actually goes away. As an adult with MDD, as an adult with generalized anxiety disorder, I can say I can tell from everyone, but I try in my life now to make everyone feel seen, heard, and valued, because you never know.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
You never know what someone else is going through. And so it's like the tiny little interactions that we have with people that can completely change their lives.
But I feel like people who've experienced any sort of mental illness in their life subconsciously draw to each other because of that mutual understanding that, okay, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that the people I love know that I care about them, I love them, I'm here to support them, because you know what it feels like to feel unsupported, to feel unloved, to feel uncared about. And I think that's a really beautiful thing of that comes on the other side of mental illness, is that we can band together and support each other and, give each other those kind of fill the gaps where we may have been missing that in one time of our lives or another. And that's a huge reason why I am choosing to go into the career that I'm going into, because I think it's so important to, show the most vulnerable people love and care and support and patience at the time that they need it most.
Either of you felt dismissed or misunderstood when talking about your mental health because of your race or gender identity?
I would say being a Black woman and some of the symptoms of depression and anxiety, how it could be presented. One of them is irritability. And being Black and being a woman and being angry or irritable is never a good mixture, even if it's justifiable anger, but especially when you're going through, if it's wrapped up in your mental health. No, you're just an angry Black woman. Like, no, you can possibly be suffering from a low that comes out as irritability. You're just angry.
I, again, am in a position where I am a white person. I grew up comfortable, and I wasn't necessarily in what's the word I'm looking for? I wasn't in any sort of marginalized group that would put me in a place where my issues weren't treated as serious as somebody else's may have. So, because of who I am and my race, and, I think for this topic, my gender helps, not most topics, but women in general, their mental health issues are taken more seriously. And it's, one of the few topics where women's issues are taken more seriously. But all of those things combined, I feel like if I asked for help and Maya asked for help, I'm going to be seen first, purely off of my race, which is a terrible, horrible thing. But it's, it's the reality and something that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about. And that, we as people who, do have that privilege need to recognize and take a step back and really think about what we can do to make the playing field equal and to make sure that everyone, no matter, what race they are, what gender they are, what sexual orientation they are getting the same and equal amount of care that they deserve.
I have found it to be very hard as a Black woman to actually be prescribed antipsychotics. Having done the research, knowing I feel like this would really work for me based on the symptoms that I'm having, depending on the provider that I'm seeing, it's been very hard to get those medications. The first time I was actually able to be placed on an antipsychotic for my mental illnesses, I had a Black woman provider. And I remember finally feeling safe, okay, she's going to listen to me. She's not just going to think I want to take drugs. I don't want to be on meds. I don't want to have to wake up every morning and take meds. I really don't. That's not something that I strive for or aspire towards, but I know that it will help me. And so the first time I finally got a Black female provider was the first time I felt safe enough and felt like I was actually going to receive the care that I needed for my mental health.
What support systems or awareness efforts do you think could help reduce numbers over time, especially in areas where resources might be limited, such as rural areas?
Yes. As someone who has worked in a women's research and BGLTQ plus student center for the past 4 years, this is a topic I get to talk about a lot and I'm very passionate about. There are several different websites, hotlines, a lot of them being digital, which can be hard in rural areas when we're talking about Wi-Fi access and things of that sort. But I think those are some of the best resources that we have for LGBTQ, things like the Trevor Project. I find that it can be very hard to find in community, especially in rural areas. But there are spaces. And again, I'd love to provide a extensive list that we can put on the screen for any LGBTQ plus youth here in Oklahoma specifically, where you can go and receive support. I have also been a part of an LGBTQIA mentor program through Pivot. And that has been lovely. It's been life-changing for me to be a part of young people's lives and help them to understand the experiences that they are going through and just be there for them throughout this time as a queer person myself.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a huge issue and something that needs to be addressed, especially in a state like Oklahoma, where so much of our population is rural communities. And I think in rural communities, being a member of the LGBTQIA plus community tends to be something that is seen as wrong.
Yes.
So those resources are not pushed out and they're not readily available. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Houston and it was way more normal there to see, high schools and middle schools having clubs for members of the LGBTQ community than it is here. And I think things like those online resources will eventually over time help, clubs like that worm their way into rural communities. And unfortunately, I do think it's just going to take time.
We know that men are often less likely to seek help for mental health struggles. What are some reasons you think the stigma persists, and how can we begin to change that?
One of the things that we talked about in my masculinity in the media course was about men's mental health and suicide and things of that sort. And this dates back to forever in time, this idea of men having to be strong providers and protectors. The patriarchy does not serve men at all. It harms men more than it'll ever help them, because it pushes these ideas of what the ideal masculinity is. And if you don't live up to that, which is very hard to do in America today, then you're a failure. If you don't make all this money, and if you don't have a wife that looks like this, and you don't have these kids, and you don't have all these things, then you're failing as a man. If you don't have a six-pack, you're failing as a man. And if you're failing as a man, then you might as well not be here.
So basically, men are expected to perform a certain way in society. And when they do not, that lends itself to anxiety and depression, which lends itself to suicidal ideation, which leads itself to the current epidemic that we're seeing of young men and men taking their own lives.
We have to go back to
the very beginning and think about, what the frame of mind is that we teach young men, even as toddlers. I mean, think about if you go to the park and you see a little boy crying and their parent, says, "Oh, don't let them see you cry. You can't cry here. Cry.
Toughen up.
Right. Toughen up." Or, like grow a pair.
Or you're okay. You're okay. Young men are taught from a young age, you're okay.
Yes.
Even when you're not okay, you're okay. So you push that down,
Right. Yeah. And I think that that idea of, oh, you're okay, you're fine, makes it that much harder for men to accept and realize the fact, even to themselves, that, hey, I'm not okay and I do need help.
Yeah.
And it's almost a shameful thing, I think, for a lot of men to reach out and ask for help, where, like, I know as a girl, I go online and all the other girlies are talking about, I'm going to therapy today.
Yes.
And I feel like you don't see that, as obviously I'm not on male TikTok, but I at least personally don't see as many male creators talking about, going to therapy and reaching out for help. And I applaud the ones who do, but it's definitely not as normalized. So then you feel like it's weird and you feel like it's not normal. And, oh, none of my other friends go to therapy. I can't be doing that. That's embarrassing. That's a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Is what it's seen at, when in reality it's not. I think asking for help and recognizing the fact that you do need help, especially as a man in a world that is looks down upon that, is one of the bravest things that you can do.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. We will be dropping a new episode every single month, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and all that communication should be coming through the NAMI Instagram.
Happy Pride Month and Men's Mental Health Month. So join us on our next episode next month, where we'll be discussing the quarter-life crisis and burnout for young adults. This has been Mindful Moments with NAMI. Don't forget, eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty, and take care of yourself.